Welcome to the Beyond the Box podcast. My name is Tamara Kellam. I'm the host and creator of Beyond the Box, a space for enhancing individual and collective resilience and embracing radical possibility. Embracing radical possibility means challenging the way we see ourselves, each other, and the world so that we can discover solutions to today's unprecedented challenges. I'm an organizational development consultant with a background in social and organizational psychology, and I'm particularly interested in systemic transformation. The questions that get me out of bed in the morning are what mechanisms drive our various social systems and how do we transform them? These are big questions, and I don't have the answers. But here's what I do know. All systems are systems of thought. All structures, especially our sociocultural structures, are intricate collections of constructs, which are thoughts. So one of the challenges we face in systemic transformation is that we tend to see systems as external to us, outside of us, rather than recognizing our role in upholding and reinforcing them through our own patterns of thinking. This is where Beyond the Box comes in. It started as a newsletter on LinkedIn, created as a space to explore the possibilities that lie beyond our existing mental models and sociocultural frameworks. But what ended up happening is I took a bit of a detour. I realized that in order to transcend our thinking, we first need to deconstruct our ideas. The analogy I use for this is or involves a Rubik's Cube. So each square in a Rubik's Cube contains a different color, and we arrange these squares using a color matching pattern. But the way we arrange the squares is constrained by the cube itself. So there's only one way to essentially solve a Rubik's Cube. And that's the dilemma we face today. We're beginning to recognize that our current structures, systems, and institutions are definitely in need of radical transformation, but our solutions are still constrained by the same patterns of thinking we've grown accustomed to. The only way to shift that pattern is to start deconstructing our long-held assumptions about life. In the first few editions of that newsletter, I found myself completely reframing my own ideas about love, power, and identity, and how those three constructs form what I now refer to in my own mind as a three-legged stool. And these foundational beliefs shape our social interactions. And I'm definitely going to talk more about this stool in an upcoming episode, because I think it's really foundational for understanding our relationships, not just our intimate relationships, but our relationships, our broader relationships. So beyond the box thinking isn't just about thinking outside the box. It transcends that. It's about dismantling the box altogether, like taking apart a Rubik's Cube and asking what new patterns of arrangement fit the context we're in today. This is important because we're trying to think our way out of challenges that are a direct result of our current way of thinking. As Albert Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. In my view, the answer isn't to double down on thought, but to deconstruct it. It's about reaching the core ideas within our thoughts and rearranging them into new patterns. Patterns we probably don't even know exist yet because we're so habituated to the way we think. So Beyond the Box is a call to lead differently, to love differently, to live differently. What would it be like to live beyond boxes altogether? That's a core question. And this involves a kind of transcendence, a psychological transcendence, if you will. And it embodies what Lisa Lahey and Robert Kegan describe in their book, Immunity to Change, as the highest level of adult mental complexity, which they refer to as the self-transforming mind. This is actually a wonderful place to focus. In Immunity to Change, Kegan and Lahey describe three levels of adult development. The first is the socialized mind, the second is the self-authoring mind, and the third is the self-transforming mind. Now, most adults operate within the first level, the socialized mind, which is oriented toward the opinions and expectations of others. Now, some leaders operate at the next level, which is the self-authoring mind, And this mind is oriented inwardly toward one's own values and beliefs. It reflects a high degree of autonomy and self-direction, and people at this level can advocate for their views even in the face of opposition. But the self-transforming mind moves fluidly between self-authorship and inquiry. It balances advocacy and inquiry, which Peter Senge talks about in the fifth discipline, where he explores systems thinking and the importance of updating our mental models or the filters through which we interpret the world. So if we're going to transform our world, we first have to transform the way we see it. We have to transform how we see it. We have to transform also how we see ourselves if we're going to transform how we see the world, because we are talking about our relationship to the world. So the self-transforming mind doesn't cling rigidly to a fixed set of beliefs. Instead, it continually updates its mental models, or its model of reality, I should say, based on feedback from the environment. So the self-transforming mind understands that its view of reality is not reality itself. It's just an approximation or a guess about reality shaped by a really limited perspective. A great analogy for this comes from neurolinguistic programming. It's one of their presuppositions or their core principles, and it's the map is not the territory. So when we're thinking about that statement, the map is not the territory. If you were to try to understand what it's like to live in Paris or Zanzibar just by looking at a map, you'd miss the experience entirely. The smells, the sounds, the energy, right? Because maps lack richness, they lack fidelity. And so this matters when we talk about reality, because our perceptions are limited by our senses, by our experiences, and by the mental models that we've inherited and that we've developed as well. So this is why the wise person is the one who knows they know nothing at all. The self-transforming mind operates with humility. It doesn't need to be right. It avoids prescriptions and instead poses solutions as experiments. It offers hypotheses, and when it gets things wrong, it doesn't spiral into self-doubt. It sees mistakes as information rather than becoming identified with those mistakes. And so being wrong isn't a personal indictment, it's an opportunity to learn and grow. So my role with Beyond the Box, my contribution, if you will, is to serve as a guide or a facilitator, a questioner. I'm not here with packaged answers or one-size-fits-all solutions. I'm here to ask better questions that help reframe our collective challenges, questions that help us rethink our relationship to power, to work, to value. That last one, value, is a big one, because how we define value shapes so many of the decisions we make. My goal is to ask meaningful questions that inspire change and positive momentum. Something that's really important is helping us see uncertainty not as a chaotic space, but as a creative medium. Because when life's materials, so to speak, our ideas, our assumptions are scattered about and disorganized, it's not necessarily a crisis. It's often an opportunity to arrange those things in a better way. So we don't have to force things back to the way they used to be, when there are endless ways to rearrange what we've been given, ways that can be more optimal, more equitable, more beautiful, more mutually enhancing, ways that benefit everyone. And I truly believe that mutually beneficial outcomes are always possible when we embrace radical possibility. And yes, this is a radical stance. I stand by it, even if people think I'm what the kids call Delulu. My 21-year-old daughter keeps me up to date on the lingo. And yes, I might come off a little Delulu sometimes. But Delulu people were the ones who imagined travel by flight, right? They're the ones who looked at the sky and believed that it could, that transportation could occur through the sky. And so here's my stance, right? If we're encountering a conflict or a challenge where a mutually beneficial outcome seems impossible, then we haven't deconstructed our mental models deeply enough. Our thinking is getting in the way, and I stand by that, and I might even die by that. If we're not seeing new possibilities, it's because we haven't looked at all of the possibilities. We haven't broken down our walls enough to see new possibilities. So what radical possibility awaits us when we actually lean in to that idea? That's a bold question, a leading edge question, and one that many of us have been taught not to ask because we've been trained to see life as inherently transactional, that trade-offs are inevitable, that giving and getting are a zero-sum game. But what if giving could be mutually enhancing? What if every act of generosity or every act of curiosity expanded both the giver and the recipient? That's the principle of abundance in action. And it stands in contrast to scarcity, which says, if I give, I'm reduced by my giving. I'm diminished by it. So that's me living on Delulu Island with a few other Delulu futurists who are imagining a world that looks radically different from the one we've inherited. But just because we've inherited doesn't mean it's the one we need to pass on to our children and our children's children. And that requires, us embracing radical possibility. And some of the topics that I address are going to get personal because if we want to transform society, we have to start by transforming ourselves. And that means putting our beliefs on the table and asking, do these beliefs still serve me? And sure, they may feel safe, but are they keeping me stuck? And where do I want to go? Who do I want to become? And how can I, without sacrificing everything I know, expand my thinking just enough to try something new? How can I experiment with a new belief? And this has huge implications for leaders. And I'm a leadership development consultant developing a program that brings many of these principles to life. So I'll discuss more of that in a future episode. But in the meantime, get ready, buckle up, because I do tend to get real. I can be radically authentic and still extraordinarily sensitive to others. I aim to be both. And finally, I want to extend an invitation. If you are a radical thinker, someone who's pushing boundaries in your field or industry, and you want to join me for a conversation on Beyond the Box, feel free to reach out. I can be reached at tamara@livebeyondthebox.com. I'm so excited to be on this journey with all of you. And I will catch you on the next episode. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final question, which is, what radical possibility are you ready to embrace in your own life? Until next time, take care.